They tricked a poor girl into a fake blind date until the billionaire spoke and silenced all. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft murmur of conversation and the delicate clinking of silverware filled the air inside one of Manhattan's most elegant restaurants. Every table glowed under golden light, each dish a work of art crafted to impress. Yet, standing at the entrance, Lena Ward clutched her small purse and felt utterly out of place. Her dress was borrowed, her shoes had a faint scuff on the heel, and her reflection in the glass door whispered what she already knew: she did not belong here. But she had promised herself she would show up. Her co-workers at the cafe had convinced her that a mystery blind date awaited her here. Someone who wanted something real. They even giggled as they helped her fix her hair. She had no idea the invitation was never meant to be kind. Table 6, table 6, she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling as she scanned the room. Then her eyes stopped. A man sat alone near the back, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, scrolling through his phone. He looked calm, confident, the kind of man who seemed to carry his own quiet gravity. Her heart thumped. That must be him, she whispered and took a steadying breath. Gathering the last of her courage, she walked toward him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Hi, you must be Daniel," she said with a nervous smile. "I am Lena. Nice to meet you." The man looked up, startled. His dark eyes met hers for a moment that seemed longer than it should have been. He blinked once, then placed his phone aside. Hi," he replied, a faint confusion crossing his face. Lena mistook his hesitation for shyness and quickly slid into the seat across from him. "Sorry, blind dates are always weird, right? My friend said you might be a little quiet, so I guess I will talk enough for both of us." He almost interrupted to correct her, but something about her earnestness stopped him. Her voice carried no pretense. Her smile was awkward but real. It was rare. He decided, almost impulsively, to play along. "Right," he said softly. "Blind dates can be something else." Lena exhaled a small, relieved laugh. "Exactly. You would not believe how long it took me to decide what to wear. I almost backed out." He smiled faintly, leaning back. "Glad you did not." "Me too," she said. Her fingers twisted the edge of her napkin. "So, what do you do?" "I work in tech," he replied simply. Her eyes brightened. "Like coding and apps and stuff? That sounds amazing. I am terrible with computers. I once crashed the register at work trying to fix a receipt." He chuckled. "Then I will make sure not to let you near my servers." The warmth in his tone eased her nerves. They began to talk about small things, safe things. She told him about her job at the cafe, about sketching customers when the place was quiet, and about her dream to one day open a small art studio. He listened, amused, intrigued. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about color and light was unlike anything he usually saw in business meetings filled with numbers and ambition. "You are not what I expected," she said suddenly, realizing how easily the conversation flowed. He tilted his head. "What do you mean? My friends said you were serious, but you are easy to talk to." He smiled, a little caught off guard by the simplicity of her words. "You are easy to talk to, too." For a brief moment, it almost felt real, a genuine connection born from a cruel setup neither of them fully understood. Then Lena's phone buzzed. She glanced down, expecting a friendly check-in. Instead, a text flashed across the screen. "How is the date going? Can he tell it is a joke yet?" Her fingers went cold. Another message popped up. "We told you the guy was rich. Hope you got a selfie before he figures out you are the waitress." Her heart dropped into her stomach. The laughter she had heard earlier from the corner table suddenly made sense. She turned slightly and saw her co-workers at the bar, phones out, recording. Her throat tightened. Heat flooded her face. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "I am sorry," she stammered. This was a mistake." The man, Ethan Ward, billionaire and founder of Ward Technologies, stood too, confusion flashing in his eyes. "Lena, wait." But she was already gone, tears blurring her vision, as she rushed through the glass doors into the cold night air. Behind her, Ethan watched, his expression shifting from surprise to something else, entirely an emotion he had not felt in years. He had seen people lie for money, for fame, for advantage, but not like this. Not a girl who had walked into a trap just to be laughed at. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire felt anger not at her, but at the world that thought kindness was something to mock. That night, the city lights blurred behind a curtain of drizzle as Lena hurried down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. Her throat ached, her chest burned with humiliation. By the time she reached the subway entrance, her reflection in the glass doors looked like a stranger, a girl who had dared to believe for 1 hour that she could be wanted. In her tiny rented room, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed on the narrow bed. The hum of traffic outside was the only sound. She opened her phone again, hoping somehow she had misunderstood, but the video was already spreading in the cafe group chat. Laughter flooded the comments. Can you believe she showed up? She really thought a rich guy would date her. Lena dropped the phone, her eyes filled with tears, hot and helpless. For months she had endured extra shifts, rude customers, and endless bills. But this cruelty was new. She buried her face in the pillow and whispered, "Never again." Across the city, in a penthouse above the glittering skyline, Ethan Ward stood by the window, still replaying the evening in his mind. He had seen greed, manipulation, and lies dressed in charm. But tonight, he had seen something raw and painfully honest embarrassment that was not deserved. He had wanted to run after her, to tell her she had nothing to be ashamed of, but she was gone before he could move. Claire, his longtime assistant, knocked on the door and peeked in. "Are you all right, sir? The investor's dinner went well." He turned, distracted. "Yes, fine. Claire, could you find out which cafe chain supplies the desserts at Bellagio restaurant?" She frowned. "That is an unusual request. Just do it," he said quietly. 2 days later, Lena returned to work at the small neighborhood cafe. Her manager barely looked up when she clocked in, but her coworkers' smirks followed her like shadows. She kept her head down, focusing on the steady rhythm of the espresso machine, pretending not to hear the whispers. By noon, the bell above the door chimed. She turned automatically with a polite smile and froze. The man from the restaurant stood there, dressed casually in a dark sweater and jeans. Without the suit, he looked almost ordinary, but the calm authority in his eyes was unmistakable. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice steady. "Large black coffee to go." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to act normal. "Of course." Her hands shook as she filled the cup. When she handed it to him, he glanced at her name tag. "Lena," he said slowly, as if trying the word on his tongue. "It suits you." She blushed, confused and wary. "You should not be here." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I owed you an apology." She blinked. "For what?" "For not stopping that night. For letting you walk out thinking you were alone." Her throat tightened. "You do not even know me." "That is true," he said, "but I know how it feels to be mocked for something you did not do. I was watching, remember?" She stared at him, unsure whether to feel comforted or exposed. "Why would someone like you care?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe because someone like me forgot how to." Before she could respond, her manager called from the counter, "Lena, table 3 needs refills." She turned, nodding quickly. When she looked back, Ethan was already leaving, the doorbell chiming softly behind him. That evening, when she counted her tips, she found an envelope beneath the register. Inside was a simple note written in clean, confident handwriting. "For the art you keep hidden, buy new brushes, E.W. Sibley 1. Alongside the note was a gift card to an art supply store and a small folded sketch of her sitting at the cafe counter, drawn in fine pencil lines. Lena held it in her trembling hands. The drawing was hers. She had left it behind at the restaurant that night. Somehow he had kept it. She looked out the window where the city glowed against the fading sky, her heart caught between fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. Maybe not everyone wanted to laugh. Maybe someone, somewhere, had actually seen her. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the thin curtains of Lena's small apartment. She sat at the edge of her bed, holding the note and the sketch again. Every line was drawn with care. The expression on her face in the drawing looked peaceful, even though she had never felt that way that night. She could not stop wondering why a man like him would even bother. At the cafe, her co-workers whispered when she walked in, but she ignored them. She worked through the morning rush until the bell above the door chimed again. She looked up and there he was, the same quiet man with calm eyes and a navy coat dusted with rain. Ethan Ward. Back again? She asked carefully, setting down a tray of mugs. I liked the coffee, he said, but mostly I wanted to see if you got the note. She hesitated. I did. You did not have to do that. I wanted to, he said simply. May I sit? Her manager glanced their way, eyebrows lifting, but said nothing. Lena nodded toward an empty corner booth. Just for a minute. They sat across from each other, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. You sketch people, Ethan said, glancing at the small notebook peeking from her apron pocket. You see things most people overlook. Lena looked down, embarrassed. It is nothing. Just a hobby. It is not nothing, he said. You have an eye for what is real. That is rare. His words were quiet but carried weight. She could not tell if he was just being kind, but something in his tone made her believe him. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. You do not owe me anything, if this is out of pity. It is not, he interrupted gently. I think you deserve to be seen for who you are, not for what they made you look like in a video. The mention of the prank made her chest tighten, but his voice held no pity, only a calm sincerity that disarmed her. Before she could respond, her manager called her again, this time more impatient. Lena, break is over. She stood quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. I have to get back to work, he nodded. Then I will get out of your way. But if you ever have time, there is a small gallery on West 42nd Street. My friend is hosting a local artist night this weekend. I think you should come. She stared at him, unsure. Why? Because your sketches deserve more than a draw, he said, standing to leave. And because I will be there. When he was gone, she stood for a long moment, his words echoing in her mind. That weekend, she almost did not go. She told herself she had to work, that she did not belong in a place where people talked about art and wine and opportunity. But something in her heart pushed her out the door. The small gallery was warm and filled with soft music. Paintings lined the white walls, and groups of people murmured over glasses of wine. Lena stood near the entrance, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, feeling completely invisible. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near a photograph display, speaking with a curator. He caught sight of her almost immediately and smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. He excused himself and walked over. You came, he said. Just for a little while, she answered, her voice small. He looked down at the sketchbook in her arms. May I see? She hesitated, then nodded, opening to a page filled with quiet portraits of strangers. Customers, bus drivers, tired faces from the subway, small glimpses of ordinary life. These are incredible, he said softly. You capture people like you know their stories. They all have one, she replied. Most people just do not stop long enough to notice. He smiled again. That is exactly what makes you different. For a moment, the noise around them faded. It was just her and him, standing between the hum of conversation and the soft glow of the gallery lights. Lena looked up, her voice almost a whisper. Why me, Ethan? He paused, meeting her eyes. Because I think you are the only person I have met who does not want anything from me. Her breath caught. Before she could say another word, someone called his name from across the room, and he gave her an apologetic look. I have to go, but keep drawing, Lena, please. As he walked away, she looked down at her sketchbook and realized she was smiling for the first time in weeks. The man she had met by accident, the one she had been tricked into meeting, was somehow becoming the one who reminded her what she was worth. A week passed after the gallery night, but Lena could not stop thinking about Ethan. His words had settled into her thoughts like the echo of a song that refused to fade. Every evening after work, she opened her sketchbook and drew again. Faces, lights, small moments. The city outside her window looked different now, not just cruel and loud, but alive, full of stories waiting to be seen. One rainy afternoon, as she was wiping down tables, her manager walked over holding an envelope. Someone dropped this off for you. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a simple invitation printed on thick white paper. Ward Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Guest invitation. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, were two words, please come. Her heart raced. She knew it had to be him. But why would a billionaire invite her, a cafe waitress, to a charity event filled with celebrities and executives. That night, she called her best friend Mia, the only person who had stood by her after the prank. "Are you going to go?" Mia asked, her voice half excitement, half disbelief. "I do not know," Lena admitted. "It feels wrong, like I do not belong there." "Lena, you have every right to walk into that room," Mia said. "Maybe it is time someone else feels out of place for a change." Waitress. On the night of the gala, Lena wore a simple dark blue dress borrowed from a coworker. It was not expensive, but it fit her well. She braided her hair loosely and stood in front of the mirror for a long time before whispering, "You can do this." When she arrived, the grand ballroom was glowing with chandeliers. Waiters moved gracefully between guests, and laughter mingled with the clinking of champagne glasses. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, feeling every stare, every curious glance. Then she saw him. Ethan Ward stood near the stage, speaking with an older man in a tuxedo. When he turned and saw her, surprise flashed across his face, followed by a genuine smile. He excused himself and walked toward her. "I did not think you would come," he said softly. "I almost did not," she replied. "But then I remembered what you told me to let myself be seen." "Yes." He smiled, looking at her with quiet admiration. "You look beautiful, Lena." Before she could respond, the lights dimmed, and the host took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's guest of honor and sponsor of this year's Art Scholarship Program, Mr. Ethan Ward." Applause filled the room as Ethan walked to the stage. Lena froze, the realization hitting her like a wave. She had known he was wealthy, but not this. The logo on the banner behind him read Ward Foundation. The entire event was his. He began to speak, thanking the guests and donors, but then his tone shifted. "This year, our foundation wants to support artists who remind us to look beyond appearances," he said, scanning the crowd until his gaze found her. "Sometimes, beauty and truth come from places we overlook. I learned that from someone who probably does not even realize how much she changed me." Murmurs spread through the audience. Lena felt her face flush, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the rest of his speech. Cameras turned, and whispers began. Someone recognized her from the viral prank video. A few guests looked at her, then at Ethan, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. The moment the applause ended, Lena slipped out into the hallway, her chest tight. She could not breathe under those lights. She found a quiet corner near the exit, her hands trembling. Ethan caught up to her a minute later. "Lena, please wait," he said gently. She turned, her voice breaking. "Why did you do that? You could have told me who you were." "I wanted to," he said, "but I did not want you to see me as the man on that stage. I wanted you to know me before the name, before the money." She shook her head. "You think I care about your money? You do not understand. I came here tonight because I trusted you. Now it feels like I walked into another joke." "Oh." His expression softened with regret. "It was never a joke to me." Tears stung her eyes. "Then why does it feel like one?" she whispered before walking away. He stood there, watching her disappear through the glass doors, the crowd's laughter echoing faintly behind him. For the first time in years, the man who had everything felt utterly powerless. The night after the gala felt endless. Lena could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flashing cameras, the whispers, the faces that stared when Ethan spoke her name. Her chest still burned with humiliation. She had trusted him, and once again, the world had found a way to make her feel small. She spent the next few days avoiding her phone and skipping work. The cafe manager left 2 messages asking if she was coming back, but she ignored them. She needed time to breathe. She needed to remember who she was before she let another person define her worth. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in his office, the city glittering outside the glass walls. The success of the gala should have felt like victory, but all he could think about was the look on her face when she walked away. Claire entered quietly, carrying a stack of files. "You have not been to any meetings this week," she said carefully. "I will handle them later," he replied without looking up. Claire hesitated, then added, "The press caught that clip of you and the girl. People are talking." "I know," he said, his voice low. "Let them talk." He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was one of Lena's sketches, the one she had left on his table weeks ago. He looked at the soft pencil lines and the words she had written in the corner. "See the good in the ordinary." That night, he made a decision. 2 weeks later, Lena returned to the cafe. Her coworkers avoided eye contact now, not because they pitied her, but because the gossip had shifted. The viral video that once mocked her had been overshadowed by something new, a story about a billionaire's charity pledge for young artists. She tried not to think about it until her manager handed her an envelope. "This came for you again," he said. Inside was a simple card. "Please come to 28th Street Studio this Saturday at 6. No crowds, no cameras, just art. E.S." Her first instinct was to throw it away, but something inside her whispered otherwise. She needed closure, even if it hurt. When she arrived at the address, she found a small renovated warehouse filled with canvases, sketches, and soft golden light. There were no photographers, no reporters, just quiet music playing in the background. At the center of the room hung a large painting, a series of faces drawn in charcoal, layered over each other like overlapping stories. At the bottom corner was a small plaque that read, "The Art of Lena Ward." Lena froze. Her breath caught. Every piece on the wall was hers, the sketches she had given him, the ones she had left behind, even the ones she had posted online under a hidden username. Ethan stepped out from the side, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans. "You said once that no one sees the people you draw," he said quietly. "I wanted to change that." She turned to him, stunned. "Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve to be seen for your art, not your mistakes," he said. "And because I needed you to know that I never wanted to hurt you." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was steady. "You could have just told me. I thought showing you would mean more than telling you," he replied. She looked around the room again, her sketches glowing softly under the lights. For the first time, people were not laughing, they were looking, really looking. Ethan took a cautious step closer. "If you want, this space can be yours. For your work, for your future." Lena shook her head slowly. "I do not need that. I just needed the truth." He nodded, his expression calm but full of regret. "Then I hope this is it." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, surrounded by her art and everything it represented. Maybe forgiveness was not a single word, it was a choice. And for the first time, Lena began to wonder if she could make it. Lena spent the next few days thinking about everything she had seen at the gallery. Every corner of that space had carried a piece of her lines, her moments, her emotions. Ethan had not only found her art, he had honored it. Yet part of her still struggled to trust his intentions. Life had taught her that kindness from powerful people often came with hidden reasons. Still, something inside her wanted to believe him. She went back to the studio a few days later, early in the morning, when the city was still quiet. The sun poured through the tall windows, washing the room in pale gold. On one wall, she noticed a new piece, a simple frame holding her very first sketch, the one she had drawn of him at the restaurant that night. Ethan's voice came from behind her. That one started everything. She turned. He looked tired but peaceful, as if he had finally stopped pretending to be someone else. "I did not know you would be here," she said softly. "I come every morning," he replied. "This place feels more real than the office ever did." She gave a small smile. "That is because this place is not built on numbers." He chuckled quietly. "No, it is built on second chances." They stood in silence for a while, surrounded by her sketches. Finally, he spoke again. "I've been thinking about that night, about how cruel it was for anyone to treat you like a joke. I wanted to fix it, but I realized I cannot undo what happened. All I can do is show you that not everyone sees you that way." Her eyes softened. "You already did more than I expected." "I am not sure that is enough," he admitted, "but I will keep trying." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. It was not the voice of a billionaire offering charity. It was a man asking for forgiveness without demanding it. "I do not hate you, Ethan," she said quietly. "I just needed time to remember how to stand on my own." He nodded. "You did that beautifully." In the following weeks, Lena began to rebuild her routine. She worked mornings at the cafe and spent her evenings at the studio, painting under the warm lights Ethan had installed. People slowly began to notice her work. A small local magazine featured her story not as the girl from a viral prank, but as an emerging artist whose honesty touched hearts. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You still take it with 2 sugars?" She smiled. "You remembered." "I remember more than that," he said. "Like the way you talk about color, or how you draw people when you think no one is watching." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you really here, Ethan? You do not owe me anything." He hesitated before answering. Maybe I owe myself a chance to feel something real. Her heart beat faster. You already have everything anyone could want. He shook his head. I have everything except peace. When I am here, with you, it is the only time I stop thinking about what the world expects of me. For a moment, she did not know what to say. The truth was, she had felt the same. His presence no longer intimidated her. It grounded her. I do not know if I am ready for more, she said honestly. I am not asking for more, he said gently. I am just asking to be part of your world, even if it is just as a friend. They spent the rest of the evening talking about her new paintings and the upcoming community art class she had been invited to teach. Ethan listened with genuine interest, helping her set up materials and even sweeping the floor when the day ended. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Lena, do you believe people can change? She looked up from her sketchbook. Only if they stop pretending. He smiled faintly. Then I guess I am finally starting. When he left, Lena walked to the window. The city stretched out below, glittering and alive. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she had almost forgotten, peace, fragile but real. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was no longer a story about a cruel prank or a billionaire's guilt. It was becoming something quieter, stronger, the story of two people learning to see each other without masks. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm between Lena and Ethan began to feel natural. They saw each other often, sometimes at the studio, sometimes at the small cafe where it had all started. Their conversations became lighter, warmer, filled with quiet laughter. What had begun as guilt and misunderstanding slowly turned into something neither of them could easily define. One evening, as the first snow fell over the city, Ethan arrived at the studio carrying a box. I brought something, he said. Lena looked up from her easel, curious. You already gave me more than enough, Ethan. This is not a gift, he said. It is an opportunity. Inside the box were promotional materials for a new project, the Open Hands Foundation, an art and education program he wanted to fund in her name. It would provide art supplies and lessons to children from low-income families. Lena's eyes widened. You cannot name it after me. Why not? He asked. You inspired it. Then she shook her head. Ethan, I do not want people to think I am just some charity story. That is not who I am. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. That is exactly why it should be your name. Because you are not a story, Lena. You are the proof that kindness still matters. She looked at him, her throat tight. You really believe that? I do, he said softly. And I believe in you. For a moment, she could not speak. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window, melting against the glass. Inside, the world felt strangely quiet, as if time had paused between them. I never wanted your pity, she whispered. I never offered pity, he said gently. I offered partnership. That word partnership settled in her heart like a small spark of light. Over the next few weeks, they began working on the project together. She taught free weekend classes at the studio, while Ethan handled logistics and funding. Watching the children paint with pure joy reminded her of who she had been before life made her cautious. Every smile, every messy brushstroke, healed a part of her she did not realize was still broken. One evening, after the last child had left, she found Ethan sitting quietly at the back of the studio, watching the sunset through the tall windows. His jacket was draped over a chair, and for the first time, he looked almost ordinary, just a man, not a billionaire. You stayed, she said softly. I did not want to leave, he replied. It feels peaceful here. She sat beside him, their shoulders barely touching. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she said, You know, I used to think the world only saw me as the girl from that video. He turned to her. And now, she smiled faintly, now I think maybe it took the wrong eyes to show me who I really am. He smiled back, his voice quiet. Sometimes the wrong story leads you exactly where you need to be. As the last light faded, Lena realized that for the first time she was no longer afraid of being seen, and perhaps neither was he. The following month, the Open Hands Foundation hosted its first public exhibition. The studio was transformed into a bright, colorful space filled with children's artwork, laughter, and the scent of fresh paint. Local reporters came, but there were no questions about the old scandal, no mocking headlines. The story was different now. It was about community, healing, and the power of art. Lena stood near the entrance, greeting visitors. She wore a simple white dress, smudged with a trace of blue paint at the sleeve. When she looked around the room, she could not help smiling. Each canvas hanging on the wall carried a piece of someone's heart, and that was more valuable than any amount of money. Then she saw him. Ethan stood across the room, talking to a group of sponsors. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod, the kind that meant, "We did it." For a moment, all the noise around her faded. Later that evening, when the guests began to leave, Lena found him cleaning up paintbrushes left by the children. "You are not supposed to be doing that," she said, laughing. He looked up with a smile. "Says who? You always told me art is about getting your hands dirty." "See," she shook her head, amused. "You never listen, do you?" "Not when it comes to you," he replied softly. Her laughter faltered. Something in his voice made her heart stumble. He stood, wiping his hands on a towel, his eyes steady on hers. "Lena, I need to say this before I lose the courage again. That night at the restaurant, I was just a stranger who happened to be sitting at the wrong table. But every day since, you have reminded me of the kind of person I want to be. You changed me in ways I never expected." Her throat tightened. "Ethan," he took a slow breath. "I am not asking for an answer now. I just need you to know that what I feel is real. No titles, no money, no stories, just us." For a moment, she could not find her voice. The truth shimmered between them like light on glass. Finally, she said, "You are the first person who ever saw me without trying to fix me. That is what scared me most." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we were both a little scared." Outside, snow began to fall again, just like the night they met. The studio lights cast a warm glow across the windows, wrapping them in quiet. Lena stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "So what happens now?" He looked at her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "Now we see where this goes. Together." She smiled through the tears in her eyes. "Together sounds good. Of you." They stood side by side, watching the snow drift through the night, knowing that the cruel joke that once humiliated her had led them both to something far more real, a story of forgiveness, courage, and love born from the most unexpected mistake. Spring arrived softly that year. The city shed its grey coat, and the streets outside the studio bloomed with color. The Open Hands Foundation had grown beyond what either of them expected. Children's artwork now hung in schools, hospitals, and community centers. Every piece carried Lena's quiet influence, a reminder that beauty could rise from pain. One afternoon, she stood in the center of the gallery space, arranging a new set of frames. The soft hum of conversation surrounded her as volunteers prepared for another charity auction. She wore her favorite blue scarf, the same one she had on the night Ethan first found her sketching by herself in the cafe. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Looks like you are building an empire," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned and smiled. Ethan stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, the same order they always shared. His tie was loose, and his sleeves were rolled up. For a man who once ruled boardrooms, he looked perfectly at peace. "I prefer to call it a beginning," she replied. "Empires are built on power. This one is built on people." He handed her the coffee and nodded. "That is exactly why it works." For a moment, they simply stood there, watching as a little girl proudly pointed at her own painting on the wall. Her mother knelt beside her, eyes shining. "That," Ethan said quietly, "is what you created." Lena shook her head. "We created it." He smiled at the correction. "You always have to have the last word, do you not?" "Only when I am right," she teased. A small pause settled between them, comfortable, unspoken, full of understanding. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in soft cloth. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a delicate silver ring with a simple blue stone. Her eyes widened. "Ethan," he took her hand, his voice calm and sure. "You once said you did not belong in places like this, but you belong everywhere kindness is. You built a world where people are seen for who they are. Let me be part of that world with you." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a moment, everything felt still, the laughter, the light, the heartbeat of the city outside. Later, when the guests gathered for the evening event, the host announced a new annual scholarship, the Lena Ward Fellowship for Young Artists. The crowd applauded, and Ethan's hand found hers under the table. As the night ended, they stepped outside into the cool air. The streetlights glowed softly, and somewhere in the distance, A musician played an old tune. Lena looked up at Ethan and smiled. "Funny," she said, "how something meant to humiliate me turned into the best mistake of my life." He smiled back, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe that is what fate really is, a mistake that leads you to the right person." They walked down the quiet street together, fingers intertwined, their laughter blending with the sound of the city. And though the world would remember their story as the girl who was tricked on a blind date, for Lena and Ethan, it would always be something else, the night the joke became love.